Are you thinking about being a nurse practitioner? It's finally 2021 and there's so many different things that you have to consider before jumping all in and being a nurse practitioner. And in this video, I'm going to be going over the top 5 things that you must consider prior to being a nurse practitioner. So stay tuned. Welcome back to the channel, LifeofaPsychNP. It's finally 2021, guys, and it's so exciting. I'm super excited for what my channel has to offer moving forward. There's some big things in the works, and I'm excited to show you guys. But before we get started, if you are new to this channel, let me formally introduce myself. I'm Darty. I'm a board-certified psychiatric nurse practitioner, and in this channel, I go over several different subjects to educate the public about mental health, ways to improve your lifestyle, topics related to nursing, nurse practitioners, and specifically psychiatric nurse practitioners like myself. So if you are interested in any of these topics, feel free to subscribe. Make sure you like this video because it helps me out so much with the YouTube algorithm, and follow me on Instagram at LifeofaPsychNP. So it's finally 2021 and you're thinking about being a nurse practitioner, and with so many different specialties and with nursing booming, you're probably leaning towards being a nurse practitioner because everyone says that's kind of the progression, but it's not necessarily that. Some people don't want to be nurse practitioners, and that's probably why you're at this video, because you want to figure out if being a nurse practitioner is right for you. And you've come to the right video because I'm here to explain certain things that you have to consider prior to jumping in to the profession as a nurse practitioner. So without further ado, let's go over my top 5 things that you have to consider prior to being a nurse practitioner in 2021. Let's go. So the very first thing that you have to consider is, what is your level of experience? And that's a very, very good thing that you have to consider, because at the end of the day, you want to have experience, especially becoming a nurse practitioner. They're selling you the dream of, oh, being a nurse practitioner is the best feeling in the world, blah, 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 blah. But let's face it, a lot of the things that we learn in nurse practitioner schools are kind of building on what we already learned in nursing school, and then the kind of experience we've had as a nurse, and then kind of builds upon that. So I definitely highly recommend that you get some experience, and you have to consider what type of experience you've had. I know so many people that want to get into psychiatric nurse practitioner schools, but they don't even have any psych experience. I'm not saying you absolutely need it, but at the same time, you have to understand that there's certain people that actually want to love and learn and want to be all about psych, but if you don't even want to get the experience as a nurse, how are you going to even know that you absolutely love it? Because I've had some experiences where people do become psych NPs but absolutely hate it because they never got the experience, and they sooner or later they realize that it's not what they wanted and it's not what they expected. So you want to see what kind of experience you have, because at the end of the day, this is going to build up to how you are as a provider. We have great bedside manner, and if you don't necessarily even have that bedside manner, then you might have to think about just getting experience and then moving on above that. So you have to always realize what type of experience do you have, and how is it going to benefit you when you are becoming a nurse practitioner, especially in a competitive market in 2021. So the second thing that you have to consider is oversaturation. So depending on the specialty you're looking at, whether it's psych, whether it's family, whether it's peds, whether it's women's health, you have to think about oversaturation. And a lot of the specialties now are becoming overly saturated because more and more nurses are becoming nurse practitioners, and there are not that many job openings for people that are trying to just get into the field. And which kind of brings us up to the next point, or which brings us up to our previous point of what kind of experience you have, because a lot of these employers that are willing to hire new grad NPs actually want people that actually worked in that specialty prior to them going to the certain specialty. So you have to think about that, and if the market's already overly saturated, then it's going to be a lot harder for you to get a job, especially if you can't even meet up the criteria of getting experience as a nurse, and then they're not going to think that you're equipped enough, or they won't even consider you if you are a nurse practitioner within that specialty. So you have to think about oversaturation. And in 2021, like I mentioned, there's so many people wanting to become nurse practitioners, and more schools are popping up. So the market's starting to become overly saturated, and it's going to be a lot harder for people to get jobs, especially if they don't have the experience or the education needed in order for them to succeed as a nurse practitioner. So think about oversaturation. And when you think about that, think about what specialty you want to go into and try to lean towards the specialties that aren't overly saturated compared to the ones that are super saturated. So the third thing that you should consider is salary. So a lot of the times people think, oh, nurse practitioners, you're going to get a bump in pay, which may be true depending on the specialty and depending on where you live and depending on a lot of several factors. But you have to consider that sometimes the pay isn't what you'd expect. Some people might just be getting $1 extra, maybe $5 extra for the amount of time, effort, and schooling that you have to put in order for you to be a nurse practitioner. And some people even get a pay cut compared to what they were getting as a nurse. So you have to consider salary, because at the end of the day, if you're taking a pay cut because of all the oversaturation, because of the specialty, because of your experience, then it might not make sense for you to become a nurse practitioner, and it might just make sense to you staying as a bedside nurse and just grinding it out that way and continue to get paid. If pay isn't that big of a thing for you, then maybe you should consider being a nurse practitioner. But if it's something that you want to consider because you feel that you need to get that extra pay because of all the school work and things you're doing, then you have to consider that it might not be in being a nurse practitioner. You may have to go the CRNA route, maybe the midwife route, but at the end of the day, don't choose something just because of salary, but you have to choose something that you have a passion for, because at the end of the day, that's going to give you the biggest difference in the quality of care that you provide. So think about that. So the fourth thing that you have to consider is your schedule. So as nurse practitioners, we have a pretty regimented schedule, and it's not necessarily flexible like nurses. A lot of nurses have either 312s, 410s, 5/8s, maybe even 16-hour shifts. But as nurse practitioners, depending on the setting you're working in, if you're looking at strictly outpatient, you're going to be probably getting only 8-hour shifts. So if you don't really like the fact that you're working 5 days a week, then this may not be the right choice for you. Yes, there's some outliers where people are working 12-hour shifts or 10-hour shifts, maybe even 16-hour shifts, but those jobs are less likely to pop up, because there's a lot of people that just want to stay in that role and don't necessarily want to leave, and there's not that many facilities are open that long unless you're working inpatient setting, urgent care setting, things like that. But for the most part, if you like your schedule as an RN and you're wanting to bank on you getting a nurse practitioner role within that same schedule, you're less likely to get that schedule. So you have to think about schedule, especially if you have other obligations such as family, such as school. Maybe you want to go to school for something else or anything else. You have to think about the schedule, because it's not going to be the same compared to as a nurse when you are a nurse practitioner. So think about that. So my fifth and final thing that you have to consider is, what's the job market around your surrounding area? So unless you're willing to move, then you don't have to worry about this. But if you're not necessarily willing to move, then you have to think about the job market around you. And depending on where you live, there might be tons of jobs, but depending on where you live also, there may be minimal jobs and a lot of applicants. So you have to think about the job market around you. If you do just a simple Indeed search and see what kind of jobs are around you, if they're not that many and they're paying really low or paying really crappy, then you have to think about, maybe this might not be right for me, because you're going to be going and being against so many students, and you're going to have to consider all of the other points that I mentioned and make sure that it's right for you. Because if you just do that simple job search on Indeed, you can see how many jobs are around you. Like, even when I look at my surrounding areas, there's not that many psychiatric nurse practitioner jobs available now in 2021. Maybe before, when you first asked me, when I graduated, there were tons and tons of opportunities out there. But now that there are more Psych NP students graduating and more Psych NP schools coming out, there are not that many jobs, probably 5 to 10 of them right now. But when you look before, there were 30, 40 jobs that are available, and they're just willing to hire anyone at higher salaries. But now not so much. So you have to look at the job market surrounding you, because that's going to be the biggest indicator on whether it may be worth it or may not be worth it. So you have to think about that. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like I said, 2021 is going to be an awesome year for you guys and for myself. I have big things planned and I'm so excited to share them with you. And right now, let's just keep it chill. Let's just take every day by day and just stay safe out there. And yeah, until next time, bye.